What if I told you that a single suitcase and a white goat could transform complete devastation into the most extraordinary second chance? This is the true story of Elena and Antonio Sanchez, and what happened next will leave you speechless. Elena clutched the young goat against her chest, watching her 3 children drive away without a single backward glance. 50 years of sacrifice reduced to this moment on a dusty rural road in the mountains of Oaxaca. Beside her stood Antonio, her husband of 5 decades, and at their feet sat a worn leather suitcase that had belonged to 3 generations of their family, and Blanquita, a white goat with immaculate fur, bleating nervously as if sensing her owner's anguish. "Mom, you have to understand this is for the best," Roberto, the eldest, had said just 30 minutes earlier in that cold voice Elena no longer recognized as her son's. "The property has been sold. The money will ensure you don't go without." The rain began to fall, soaking through Elena's woven shawl and Antonio's cotton shirt.
"They really left us, Antonio," Elena whispered, her voice breaking.
"Like we're worth nothing. Like 50 years meant absolutely nothing. We've always found a way forward, my love," Antonio responded, though Elena could see the fear hiding behind his brave words, the moisture in his eyes that wasn't just from the rain. But here's where the story takes its first unexpected turn. Because before we continue, I need you to understand something crucial about what they discovered that day. Something that would change not just their lives, but the lives of dozens of people they hadn't even met yet. Blanquita was the last of 8 goats they'd raised on their small ranch. The others had been sold along with everything else, without Elena and Antonio having any say in decisions that affected their entire existence. Roberto, Daniel, and Sofia had decided every detail without consulting the parents who gave them life. They sold the small property where the couple had built their dreams for over 35 years, claiming they no longer had the capacity to maintain it. "We worked our entire lives on that land," Elena murmured, holding Blanquita tighter. "I raised all 3 of you selling goat cheese, making preserves for the town market, caring for every peso like it was gold.
And now we're the ones who are worthless." A truck appeared through the rain, slowing down beside them.
The driver, a bearded man named Fernando, looked at the soaked elderly couple with genuine concern. "Need help?" he asked. Within minutes, they were in his truck, heading toward San Miguel del Valle, their new reality becoming clearer with each passing kilometer. "Our children sold our house without asking," Elena began, needing desperately to unburden herself to this stranger. "They said it was for our own good, that we were a burden." Fernando was genuinely shocked. He drove them to a modest boarding house run by Doña Mercedes, who reluctantly agreed to accept them despite her strict no animals policy, moved by their desperate situation. The room cost 150 pesos per week, with Blanquita included. But wait until you hear what happened next, because nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to discover. That night, exhausted and heartbroken, they finally examined what Roberto had left in the suitcase. Inside were only a few old clothes and a cold, impersonal letter printed from a computer. The letter informed them that the property sale would provide a monthly income of 900 pesos sent on the 5th of each month.
900 pesos to live with dignity after a lifetime of work. 50 years raising those ungrateful children, Elena erupted, tearing the letter into smaller and smaller pieces.
"Roberto nearly killed me during childbirth. I was in labor for 3 days. And Daniel, when he got that mysterious fever at 7 years old, who stayed awake night after night? Who sold our gold wedding rings to pay for the private doctor who finally cured him?" But then something extraordinary happened. Blanquita began scratching insistently at the suitcase, pawing at the same spot on the interior lining. "What is it, little one?" Antonio asked, intrigued by the goat's determined behavior. Antonio carefully examined where Blanquita was scratching. The fabric lining was loose, poorly hand-stitched with irregular stitches. He gently pulled at the fabric and discovered a secret compartment hidden within the lining. Inside was a yellowed envelope containing several folded documents. "This is your father's handwriting," Elena said immediately, recognizing the elegant script. Antonio's father had died 16 years earlier, and they'd had no idea about any hidden documents. "Property deed," Antonio read aloud, his voice breaking. "State of Michoacán, Municipality of Pátzcuaro. Lot 32 of the old Santa Clara Ranch." His eyes widened. "It specifies 15 hectares. Dated 1976, but there was more."
A handwritten letter from his father? "My dear son Antonio, if you're reading this, I've left this world.
"These lands in Michoacán belonged to my family for generations. They passed from my grandfather to my father and from my father to me. When I married your mother and we moved to Oaxaca, I left these lands behind, always intending to return. Now they're completely yours. I have no idea what condition they're in after so much time abandoned, but they're your legitimate inheritance. Take care of them well. With all my love, your father, Jose Sanchez." The silence that followed was profound. Neither of them had known anything about lands in Michoacán. After 50 years of marriage, this secret had been perfectly hidden. The next morning, they sought legal help, eventually meeting Licenciado Alfredo Morales, an honest lawyer who agreed to investigate the property. But first, they encountered Rodrigo Torres, a corrupt lawyer who tried to steal their documents, demanding half the value of any findings. It was Blanquita who saved them again, somehow escaping their room and bursting into Torres's office, attacking him with her small horns long enough for them to grab the documents and flee. "How did Blanquita get out of the room?" Elena asked breathlessly as they hid in a distant plaza. "I have no idea. But this goat just saved us from losing everything," Antonio replied. That's when they met Alfredo Morales, the real attorney who would change their fate. Unlike Torres, Alfredo listened with genuine compassion. He reviewed their documents carefully and said something that would alter their destiny. This appears completely legitimate and potentially very valuable. Alfredo explained that verifying everything would cost 700 pesos for official fees and travel to Michoacán, but he would donate his professional services. "My father was a campesino his entire life," he explained. "When he got old and sick, my siblings and I cared for him until his last day. But I know not all families act this way. When I can help, I do." For the next week, Elena woke before dawn to bake bread, selling it on the streets. Antonio worked at a grocery store despite his bad back. Together, with the first payment from their children, they gathered exactly 700 pesos. 3 weeks later, Alfredo returned with news that would change everything. "The lands exist," he confirmed. "They're registered in your father's name and now legally yours. But there's more." He paused. "Those lands have increased exponentially in value. The entire Pátzcuaro region is in tourism development. Your 15 hectares are worth conservatively at least 350,000 pesos, possibly up to 500,000. Elena began crying uncontrollably. It was a sum of money they'd never imagined in their wildest dreams. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary, because what Elena and Antonio did next would define not just their legacy, but the lives of countless others. "There's one complication," Alfredo continued. "A family's been living on the land for 9 years.
They have a house, crops, animals. Legally, you can evict them or you can negotiate. We need to see these lands," Elena said, with determination.
"We need to meet this family before making any decision." The next day, they traveled to Pátzcuaro. What they found was beautiful. A simple but well-built house, productive gardens, chickens, pigs, and kilometers of fertile land planted with corn, beans, and squash. Patricia Mendoza, a thin woman of about 45, came out of the house, terror in her eyes when she saw the lawyer. "You came to throw us out, didn't you?" she said, her voice breaking.
"Please, we have nowhere to go."
"My husband is very sick." Inside they met Martin, Patricia's husband, extremely thin and pale, struggling to breathe. Around them, 3 children watched with frightened eyes. Patricia explained they'd found the land abandoned 9 years ago, thinking it was unclaimed government property. They'd built everything with their own hands. Elena looked around at this family, saw their honest struggle, their desperate love for each other. She remembered her own children and how they'd treated her without compassion. And right there, she made a decision that would echo through the years. "We don't want to evict anyone," Elena said firmly. "We want to propose a partnership. You continue living here and working the land. We come in as legal owners. We split all profits exactly in half, and we help with Martine's medical treatment." Patricia began crying.
"You would really do that for us?"
"But we're complete strangers. Today you're strangers," Elena said, with wisdom. "Tomorrow you could be our partners, and who knows, with time, maybe even friends." The contract was drawn up. Patricia and Martine would have lifetime rights to live on and work the property. Profits would be divided equally. Elena and Antonio would help with all of Martine's medical expenses. But the story doesn't end there.
Because when Roberto, Daniel,
and Sophia learned about the lands, they returned, demanding their legal inheritance rights. They showed up at the boarding house not to apologize, but to claim what they believed they deserved. "We have rights to a portion of those lands," Roberto said coldly. As if in a business meeting, the confrontation escalated. During the argument, Blanquita escaped through an open window. Elena rushed after her into the backyard, tripping violently on an exposed root and falling hard.
Her scream of pain was devastating.
She'd broken her ankle, and here's what happened next that will make you question everything about family. Roberto, Daniel, and Sophia stood at the entrance to the yard, arguing among themselves about the inheritance while their mother lay on the ground in agony. "Should we maybe help?" Sophia asked uncertainly. "Let Dad handle it," Roberto responded coldly. "We need to stay focused on the land issue." "Monsters!" Antonio shouted with all the force of his lungs.
"Get out of here immediately. Leave and never appear in front of us again."
The children left, but not before threatening legal action. However, Antonio and Alfredo moved quickly, legally transferring half of the property to Elena's name while Antonio was still alive, protecting it from future inheritance claims. When the children sued, the judge not only dismissed their case but reprimanded them publicly. "It's absolutely shameful to see adult children acting this way," the judge said sternly. "Trying to strip their elderly parents while they're still alive. Have at least a minimum of decency." Defeated legally, the children tried spreading malicious rumors around town, but the community rallied behind Elena and Antonio. People who bought Elena's bread daily, merchants who knew Antonio's honest work, neighbors who'd witnessed everything, all positioned themselves firmly in favor of the elderly couple. Then came Gabriela, a nurse from the regional hospital and Patricia's niece.
"I know the whole truth about you," she said. "I know your children abandoned you. I know about the inherited lands.
And I want to help." Gabriela helped them access government programs for vulnerable seniors and spread the real truth about their situation, effectively countering the children's lies. With the first harvest from Pátzcuaro, exceptionally good that year, Elena and Antonio received 18,000 pesos after the equal split. They'd never seen so much money together, and this is where their story transforms from personal triumph to something much greater. "Antonio," Elena said thoughtfully, "we went through everything we went through, right? The terrible pain of being abandoned, of having nowhere to go. There must be other elderly people in exactly the same horrible situation. Others whose children abandoned them, who have nothing. You want to help others?" Antonio understood immediately. "I want to create a place," Elena said with determination. "A true refuge where abandoned elderly can live with dignity, have peace, feel valued again, using money from the harvest and Alfredo's free legal help." They returned to Pátzcuaro to speak with Patricia and Martin, who fell in love with the idea. "There's more than enough space here," Martin said, now notably recovered from his illness. "We can build several simple houses on the north part of the land without affecting the crops." With Sophia's help, who had returned alone, genuinely repentant, and with donations that began arriving when the story spread through the region, the project took shape rapidly. In just 6 intense months, they had 5 modest but dignified houses ready, plus the main house. Every elderly person who comes to live here will receive their own goat or chickens, Elena decided firmly, so they have faithful companionship like I had with Blanquita. The first resident was Don Esteban, a 74-year-old man who'd been left in a public nursing home and forgotten by his family for over 3 years. He arrived sad, quiet, without hope. "This is your home now, Don Esteban," Elena said warmly, handing him a small white goat identical to Blanquita. Esteban took the goat with trembling fingers.
"It's been over 50 years since I touched a goat," he said, his voice breaking.
"Since I lived on the ranch with my parents as a boy." Gradually, more abandoned elderly arrived. Doña Carmen, whose children had fought violently over the inheritance before she'd even died. Don Hector, whom a scammer had robbed of everything. Doña Magdalena, abandoned at a bus terminal by her daughter-in-law. Each received their own small house and a companion animal. The place was named Refugio Esperanza, Hope Refuge, in eternal honor of the white goat that had changed absolutely everything. The story began spreading rapidly through the region. Local newspapers wrote moving articles. A radio station conducted interviews. Finally, a state television channel sent a complete team to do a special report. "We're here at Refugio Esperanza," the reporter said emotionally. "An extraordinary place created by an elderly couple who were cruelly abandoned by their own children, but who transformed that immense pain into unconditional love to help others in similar situations." The complete report aired on the primetime evening news. Hundreds of thousands of people across Oaxaca and Michoacán watched it, including Roberto and Daniel, the 2 eldest sons who had never truly repented. They saw their parents on national television, saw the genuine happiness in their weathered faces, saw the incredible good they were doing, and saw Sophia there too, working, smiling, being a true daughter. "We made a terrible mistake," Daniel told Roberto. "Mistake is saying very little," Roberto responded bitterly. "We were true heartless monsters, but pride was still stronger than any remorse. They didn't seek out their parents, simply moved discreetly to another city, too ashamed to face what they'd done." The television report brought something completely unexpected: massive donations. People from absolutely all over the country sent money, construction materials, furniture, clothing, generously offered volunteer work. "Look at this." Antonio showed Elena the new cell phone Sophia had given them, filled with messages. People are writing from Mexico City, from Guadalajara, from Monterrey, from everywhere wanting to help somehow. With the abundant donations, they built 5 additional houses. The chicken coop expanded enormously. They created an impressive community garden where all the elderly planted together, sharing the work. They built a large equipped kitchen where they prepared meals in community, creating bonds. 1 year after creating the refuge, on Elena and Antonio's 51st wedding anniversary, they organized a grand celebration. Absolutely all the residents participated enthusiastically. Gabriela, the nurse, came with her entire extended family. Licenciado Alfredo Morales attended, elegant as always. Doña Mercedes closed the boarding house for a complete day to be present. Fernando, the truck driver, appeared with an enormous 3-tier cake. "You literally changed my life," Fernando said emotionally. "Seeing everything you accomplished inspired me deeply. Now I regularly visit nursing homes, bringing fruit and sweets to the forgotten elderly there. And I convinced the hospital administration to organize free health days here," Gabriela completed. "Once a month, doctors and nurses come examine everyone without charging anything." Alfredo raised his glass of punch solemnly. "A toast to Elena and Antonio," he said loudly, "who miraculously transformed cruel abandonment into loving refuge, who demonstrated conclusively that age definitely doesn't define the capacity to love and help. Everyone toasted emotionally. Elena looked slowly around, absorbing every detail. She saw genuinely happy faces, elderly who'd arrived completely destroyed, and now smiled with hope. She saw Blanquita, now quite old, pecking slowly in the middle of the party, lovingly surrounded by dozens of goats and chickens. She saw Antonio, her unwavering companion of more than 5 decades, with eyes bright, full of tears of pure emotion. "We did it." "My old man," Antonio whispered, embracing her. "We always did, my love," Elena responded. "Always together, no matter what." Sophia was present too, now living permanently in one of the houses she'd helped build with her own hands. She'd definitively left the city, cut contact with her brothers, and dedicated herself completely to helping her parents at the refuge. "Mom, Dad," she called out, standing up emotionally. "Can I say something important?" Everyone maintained respectful silence. "I want to publicly apologize in front of everyone," Sophia said, her voice trembling. "I know I've done it literally thousands of times privately, but I need everyone here present to know the truth.
I cruelly abandoned my parents. I was selfish, terrible, unforgivable. Her voice broke completely.
But they generously forgave me. They gave me a second chance I never deserved, and for that, I will dedicate absolutely the rest of my life to honoring that undeserved forgiveness." Elena stood up with difficulty because of the knee that always bothered her since the fall, and hugged her daughter tightly. "You already honor it, my girl," she said tenderly. "Every day you honor it with your actions." The party continued joyfully until very late. When everyone finally went to sleep, Elena and Antonio remained seated on a wooden bench, watching the small houses illuminated by soft lights. "Do you remember that terrible day on the road?" Elena asked. "When the kids left us there abandoned under the cold rain with only Blanquita and the old suitcase?"
"How could I forget?"
Antonio responded. "I honestly thought everything had definitively ended."
"I thought we no longer had absolutely anything, that we were nothing to anyone." Antonio took her wrinkled hand and kissed it.
"And look at us now, my love, surrounded by people we love and who love us, doing real good in the world, living with true dignity." "You know what I learned, Antonio?" Elena said, squeezing his hand. "That sometimes we need to lose absolutely everything to be able to find what really matters in life." Blanquita appeared slowly and with difficulty jumped with effort onto Elena's lap, as she did religiously every night before sleeping. "And that a goat can literally save our lives," Antonio added, laughing and stroking Blanquita's now dull feathers. In the following months, Refugio Esperanza continued growing steadily. They now had capacity for 20 elderly, each with their unique painful story, each with their faithful companion animal. Then they received an official letter from a national organization for elderly rights, informing them they'd won a national prize for exceptional social initiative. The prize included 50,000 pesos. They used the money wisely to substantially improve the facilities, built a small equipped infirmary, bought basic medical equipment, hired a part-time nurse, and prudently saved a considerable part for future emergencies. But as always in life, more challenges awaited. One day, a severe municipal inspector appeared without warning, saying he'd received anonymous complaints that the refuge was operating irregularly without necessary permits. Alfredo did some discreet investigating and discovered the truth. It had been Roberto and Daniel, the children who never repented. The complaint brought a very real problem. The refuge indeed needed specific sanitary licenses, construction permits, operating licenses as an assisted living facility. Permits that would cost a lot of money and take months to process. "Are we going to have to close?" Elena asked, absolutely desperate. "Not if I can help it somehow," Alfredo responded, immediately beginning work. It was Doña Carmen who had the saving idea. "Let's make food to sell. Bread, cakes, cucaras, tamales.
Everyone here knows how to make something special. The idea caught fire.
They transformed the community kitchen into a small production enterprise. Elena patiently taught traditional bread making. Doña Carmen directed cake making. Don Esteban made authentic Oaxacan tamales. Doña Magdalena prepared typical sweets. Sofia and Patricia organized logistics and took products to sell in the markets of Pátzcuaro and nearby towns. The success was immediate and resounding. Foods from Refugio Esperanza, they proudly announced, made with genuine love by elderly who were abandoned but never gave up. The story powerfully captured attention. Again, more journalistic reports, more generous donations, and finally, after 8 agonizing months, all licenses and permits came through approved. 5 complete years had passed since that rainy, terrible day on the road. Refugio Esperanza was now a national reference in elderly care. Other similar places were being created throughout Mexico. Directly inspired by their story, they now had 25 houses, an enormous garden that produced almost all the vegetables they consumed, a corral with more than 100 animals among goats, chickens and pigs, a modern industrial kitchen for food production, and a solid team of permanent volunteers who helped. Sofia had finally married a wonderful volunteer named Miguel. They lived in one of the houses and efficiently coordinated the refuge alongside Elena and Antonio. "You don't need to work so much anymore," Miguel would tell them worriedly. "Rest, please enjoy what you built." "But this is enjoying," Elena always responded. "Seeing these people happy and at peace, knowing we make a real difference." Blanquita, now 11 years old, was definitely very old. She barely moved anymore. She spent practically all day sleeping on Elena's lap. The veterinarian who regularly visited the refuge said she wouldn't last much longer. "This goat should have left years ago," he explained. "It's as if she's waiting for something important before departing." "She's waiting to make sure everything is okay," Elena said. "She still has to keep me company a little longer." One morning, Elena woke and Blanquita wasn't moving at all. Her heart stopped. She picked up the goat with infinite care, feeling she was already leaving. "Antonio!" Elena called with a desperate voice. They called Sofia, Miguel, and Gabriela. Everyone gathered around Blanquita in respectful silence. "Thank you, my precious girl," Elena whispered, stroking the white fur, now dull. "Thank you for absolutely everything. For saving us, for giving us hope when we had none, for staying with us all these years." Blanquita opened her eyes with effort, looked directly at Elena, and emitted a soft, almost imperceptible sound, then quietly closed her eyes for the last time and stopped breathing. Everyone cried inconsolably. They buried Blanquita ceremoniously in a special corner of the refuge under a flowering jacaranda tree. They placed a bronze plaque, "Blanquita, the white goat that changed absolutely everything." She completely fulfilled her mission, but then something magical happened. A white goat, identical to Blanquita, mysteriously appeared at the refuge.
Nobody, absolutely nobody, knew where it had come from.
It simply appeared one morning and went directly toward Elena. "Look at that," Sofia said, amazed. "It's identical to Blanquita." "It's not Blanquita," Elena said, carefully taking the goat. "But maybe it's a sign from the universe that we should continue this work." They baptized the new goat as Milagro, Miracle, and she quickly became the new official mascot of the refuge. The years continued passing inexorably. Elena and Antonio aged more, became more physically fragile, but never lost that special brightness in their eyes. "Tired, my old man?" Elena would ask regularly. "Tired, yes, but deeply happy," Antonio always responded. At 80 and 82 years old, respectively, they finally decided to pass complete operational management of the refugee to Sofia and Miguel. But they continued living there, participating in what they could, doing what their bodies allowed. One afternoon, seated on the same wooden bench where they'd sat countless times, watching together the spectacular sunset over the refuge they'd created. Elena sighed deeply. It was completely worth it, wasn't it, Antonio?
Every second, every tear, every pain, every sacrifice, Antonio responded. If you could magically go back to that terrible day on the road under the rain,
Knowing absolutely everything that would happen afterward, would you do it all exactly the same? Antonio thought carefully. I would, without hesitating a second, because all that suffering was precisely what brought us here. And here is exactly where we needed to be. Elena snuggled comfortably into his wrinkled shoulder. I love you, my dear old man, from the first day to the last day. And I love you infinitely more still. My entire life, they remained there in contemplative silence, watching Milagro play happily in the patio with the other goats, watching the elderly walk peacefully among the houses, watching Sophia and Miguel work together as the perfect team they'd become. We did it, Elena, Antonio murmured finally. We converted the deepest pain into unconditional love, cruel abandonment into warm welcome, devastating loss into invaluable gain. We always did it, my love, because we always had each other, Elena responded. And there, on that worn wooden bench, with the sun painting the sky in intense oranges and roses, two elderly people who had been cruelly abandoned but never gave up, who had lost absolutely everything but gained much more than they ever imagined possible, embraced with infinite tenderness, united eternally by 51 years of unbreakable love, shared struggle, and hard-won victory. Refugio Esperanza would continue its sacred mission, continue welcoming, loving, helping, healing, because Elena and Antonio had demonstrated to the entire world that it's never too late to start over. That age definitely doesn't define the capacity to do good, and that frequently life's greatest blessings are born precisely from the greatest pains, and everything, absolutely everything, had begun with 3 children who cruelly abandoned their parents on a road with only an old suitcase and a white goat. But they had no idea what was hidden in that suitcase. They had no idea of those parents' unbreakable strength. They had no idea that by trying to destroy them, they ended up creating something infinitely greater and more significant than themselves. So what did you think of this moving story? Do you sincerely believe Sophia deserved her parents' forgiveness? Would you do exactly what Elena and Antonio did, transforming pain into love to selflessly help others? Leave your most sincere opinion in the comments, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other equally emotional stories that will touch your heart. Now I invite you to watch the next video that appears on your screen, where you'll discover another incredible story that will move you deeply. Your participation and support make all the difference to us. Thank you for accompanying us to the end of this story.